I collapsed with a high fever and begged my parents to care for my wheelchair-bound son. Mom scoffed, "We're busy with your sister's wedding dress. Don't bother us." My sister laughed. "This is what you get for having a useless child." Then, the call ended. 2 weeks later, desperate knocking echoed at my door. "Please, listen to us." Linda Gardner woke up before sunrise. She meant to get up early as usual to prepare breakfast, but her body felt terribly heavy. Her head was throbbing, and her throat burned with dryness. Still, she got up and headed toward Noah's room. "Noah, time to wake up." Her 12-year-old son, lying in bed, opened his eyes at the sound of his mother's voice. His black hair was disheveled on the pillow, and his gentle brown eyes looked up at her. "Good morning, Mom," Noah smiled. "Are you okay? You don't look well." Linda forced a brave smile. "I'm just a little tired. Come on, let's get ready for school." She helped Noah transfer to his wheelchair and began their morning routine. Since the car accident 3 years ago, their daily life had completely changed. Noah had lost the use of his lower body, and Linda had to balance caring for him alongside her own work. Her nursing job at the local hospital was demanding, physically and mentally exhausting, but she never complained. "Mom, don't you have a fever?" Noah asked worriedly at the breakfast table. Linda answered, feeling her headache worsening. "I'm fine. I have a short shift today, so I'll rest when I get home." After dropping Noah off at school, her smartphone rang on the way to the hospital. It was her mother calling. Linda sighed before answering. "Good morning, Mom." "Linda, the date for Vanessa's dress fitting has changed. It's next Wednesday. You should come too." Diane's voice was commanding. "Mom, I work on Wednesdays. Besides, Vanessa doesn't want me there, always making excuses. We're family, Linda. This is Vanessa's special day." Linda closed her eyes, enduring her headache as she answered. "I know, but I really can't take time off." After the call ended, she fought back tears. To her parents, she was always a disappointment. As a single mother raising a child with a disability, Linda was the family's shame. Meanwhile, her sister Vanessa was her parents' pride. She was beautiful, successful, and engaged to Bradley, the owner of an upscale boutique. When she arrived at the hospital, Linda's condition had worsened. Her colleague Sarah noticed her paleness. "Linda, are you all right? You look like a ghost." "I'm just feeling a little under the weather," she began to say when suddenly dizziness overwhelmed her. Sarah had to catch her, or she would have collapsed to the floor. "I'm going to get Dr. Edward," Sarah said and quickly returned with the doctor. Dr. Edward examined Linda in an examination room. "You have a high fever. It's likely influenza. You need absolute bed rest for at least 3 days." "But Noah." "Linda," the doctor looked at her sternly. "You're a healthcare professional. You're good at sacrificing yourself to help others, but if you collapse, you can't care for anyone. You need rest." Linda nodded in resignation. "But who will take care of Noah? Don't you have family, Doctor?" Edward asked. Linda gave a bitter smile. The truth was, she did have someone she could rely on. Judith, the owner of the popular wedding venue Willow Creek Manor, was her close friend. Thanks to Judith, Vanessa's wedding had been booked at a special price. However, her parents didn't know the details. They only knew Linda had connections and never bothered to ask for more information. Family. Linda chose her words carefully. "Yes, I have my parents and sister. But try reaching out to them," Sarah said gently. "Even the most difficult families come together in times of need." Linda nodded weakly. Grateful for her colleague's kindness, she still felt anxious inside. Asking her parents for help was like seeking shelter in a storm. On her way back to her small apartment on 25 Tremble Street, she called Noah's school to arrange for his early dismissal. Then, with trembling hands, she dialed her parents' number. Her hands were sweaty from the fever and anxiety. In Linda's mind, she could already hear her parents' cold words, see her sister's contemptuous gaze, and worst of all, imagine the treatment Noah might receive. But she had no choice. As the phone continued to ring, Linda took a deep breath. She whispered a small prayer, "Just this once, please help." The moment she heard her mother Diane's voice on the other end, Linda felt a knot of anxiety in her throat. Her vision blurred from the fever, and her head was pounding. With a trembling voice, she said, "I hate to ask, but I need some help." "Linda, I'm very busy right now." Diane's voice contained obvious irritation. "What is it? Make it quick." Linda closed her eyes, enduring the pain throughout her body as she forced out the words, "I've come down with the flu and have a high fever. The doctor ordered complete bed rest. I was wondering if you could look after Noah for a few days." There was a moment of silence on the other end, followed by a sigh. "Well, the timing couldn't be worse," Diane said coldly. "You know that this week we have Vanessa's final wedding dress fitting. We still need to check the invitations, and we have a meeting about the flower arrangements." "I know," but Linda answered weakly, "I'm really not well, and I can't leave Noah alone." You're always like this. Diane's voice sharpened. Always causing problems at the worst possible time. This is such an important time for Vanessa, and here you are trying to steal the attention again. Linda felt tears in her eyes. Her body burned like fire from the fever. Her head was splitting with pain, and yet there wasn't a single word of concern from her mother. "Mom, please," she begged. "I'm really not feeling well. I have no one else to turn to. Vanessa's wedding is more important than your problems." Diane finally shouted, "Stop interfering. It's always the same with you. Always problems. Why can't you solve your own issues?" Linda collapsed onto her bed, quietly crying with the phone still held to her ear. Her mother's words hurt more than the physical pain. "Let me talk to her." Another voice was heard in the background. It was Vanessa's voice. "Vanessa wants to talk to you," Diane said, and there was the sound of the phone being handed over. "Linda?" Her sister's voice sounded cold. "Are you causing problems again? Can you please not involve Mom and Dad?" "My special day is coming up, Vanessa," Linda said, holding back tears. "I didn't choose to get sick like this. This is what happens when you have a worthless child." Vanessa suddenly spat out. "I can't let my special day be ruined. You need to deal with the consequences of your choices." Linda was stunned by the words, momentarily speechless. The cruelty of her sister calling Noah worthless sent anger coursing through her. "Noah is not worthless," she raised her voice. "He's my son. How dare you say such a thing?" "But we're suffering because of your choices," Vanessa coldly replied. "Mom and Dad have always cleaned up after you. But not this time. Preparations for my wedding take priority." In the background, she heard her father Robert's voice. "That's enough. Hang up now. Dad says to end this," Vanessa said curtly. "Solve your own problems. It has nothing to do with us." The phone suddenly disconnected, leaving Linda alone in the silence of her room. Still clutching her smartphone, she began to shake violently. It wasn't just from the fever. Anger, sadness, and a sense of despair overwhelmed her. She collapsed onto her bed, unable to stop crying. Her headache intensified, and her body burned with fever. But her heart hurt the most. The pain of being rejected by her family, abandoned when she needed help the most, and above all, the pain of hearing Noah called a worthless crushed her. The sound of the doorbell startled her. Feeling a faint hope, she crawled out of bed and headed toward the door. Maybe her parents had changed their minds. When she opened the door, Sarah was standing there. Her hospital colleague's face was filled with concern. "Linda, you shouldn't be walking in your condition," Sarah cried in surprise, immediately supporting her. "Why aren't you in bed?" Linda rested her head on Sarah's shoulder. "Noah, he'll be coming home from school. That's why I'm here," Sarah said gently. "I heard about the situation from Dr. Edward. I've already contacted the school and arranged to pick up Noah. You need to get back to bed." Sarah helped Linda back to bed and placed a cool cloth on her forehead. Through tears, Linda told her about the phone conversation. "They're my family. Why won't they help me?" Sarah squeezed her hand. "You have a real family. Noah and me. Rest now. I'll take care of everything." "But you have your own family." "Friends are family too," Sarah said firmly. "My husband understands. Noah is a wonderful boy, and our son loves playing with him. Don't worry. I'll look after both of you for a few days." Linda's heart filled with gratitude. The pain of rejection from her parents and sister remained, but Sarah's presence gave her comfort. "Sarah, don't talk anymore." Sarah handed Linda medicine and water. "Take this and rest. Leave Noah to me." After taking the medicine, Linda remembered one more thing before closing her eyes. In a small voice, she said to Sarah, "Sarah, could you get my phone?" When Sarah handed her the smartphone, Linda scrolled through her contacts and found the name Judith Willow Creek. She hesitated for a moment, but then, determined to sever the relationship with her parents completely, she sent a message. "Judith, we need to talk about my sister's wedding reservation." After sending the message, Linda placed her smartphone on the side table. As she closed her eyes, her tired body quickly fell asleep. Tears still stained her cheeks, but her face showed an expression of quiet resolve. Linda had made a decision about what real family means, and how to deal with people who don't understand her worth. In the midst of her fever, a new strength was beginning to grow in her heart. 2 weeks had passed, and Linda had fully recovered. The flu symptoms were gone, and she had returned to her normal rhythm of life. Thanks to Sarah's dedicated help, Noah had been well cared for even while Linda was bedridden. "Mom, why haven't Grandma and Grandpa called lately?" Noah asked one evening after finishing his homework. Linda paused while preparing dinner in the kitchen. "Well, they're busy with preparations for Vanessa's wedding." "Am I invited to the wedding?" Linda turned to look at her son sitting in his wheelchair. His innocent gaze made her heart ache. "I don't know, Noah. We haven't received an invitation yet." In reality, Linda was prepared for the fact that Vanessa probably wouldn't invite them to the wedding. The recent exchange had driven the final wedge in their relationship. And after the message she'd sent to Judith, Linda smiled softly and returned to her cooking. The conversation with Judith had been brief but effective. She could imagine the impact of the words special discount conditional on being a friend of Linda Gardner. Mom, someone's coming. Noah pointed outside the window. Linda wiped her hands and headed to the living room, but the doorbell hadn't rung yet. It doesn't look like anyone's here, Noah. At that moment, a series of loud knocks echoed through the apartment. Continuous, frantic knocking. Please, Linda, open up. Her mother's cries could be heard through the door. Linda stood frozen. Noah also looked at his mother with a surprised expression. Again came the knocking, even stronger and more desperate this time. Linda, please, open up. We need your help. Mom? Noah asked in a quiet voice. It sounds like Grandma is crying outside the door. Linda slowly approached Noah and placed a hand on his shoulder. Noah, could you wait in your room for a little while? Though looking worried, Noah nodded and headed to his room. Linda stood in front of the door for a while. The knocking continued, and her mother's crying didn't stop. Taking a deep breath, Linda finally opened the door. There stood Diane with red, swollen eyes, Robert with an angry expression, and Vanessa with tear-filled eyes. Finally you opened. Diane sighed with relief. Linda, please, we need your help. What's wrong? Linda asked calmly. Various emotions swirled inside her, but she didn't show them on her face. Can we come in? Robert asked in a stern voice. Linda moved a step to the side and invited the three in. Vanessa had clearly been crying, with no trace of her usual confident demeanor. Linda, something terrible has happened, Diane said with a shaking voice. The venue has canceled our reservation. Willow Creek Manor. Linda pretended to be surprised. Yes, Vanessa cried out. With only 2 months until the wedding. What are we going to do? According to what we've heard, Robert stepped forward and stared at Linda. You had something to do with it. Linda calmly returned her father's gaze. Why would you think it's my fault? The owner of Willow Creek Manor says, Diane began explaining through tears that the special discount was conditional on being a friend of Linda Gardner. And you revoked your approval. That's not all, Robert added. All other venues are fully booked. There's no place available at this time of year. Vanessa approached Linda, crying. Please, Linda, help us. You're our only hope. Linda looked at Vanessa, remembering her words from 2 weeks ago over the phone. Worthless. The pain of that word hadn't healed yet. What do you expect from worthless me? Linda coldly replied. The three fell silent simultaneously, staring at Linda. The color drained from Vanessa's face. Diane seemed at a loss for words, and even Robert appeared weaker than his usual dignified posture. Linda, you, Diane began to say. Remember? Linda spoke quietly but forcefully. 2 weeks ago, when I collapsed with a high fever and asked you to look after Noah. The three exchanged glances, seemingly searching for excuses. What did you say when I was sick and asked for help? Linda continued. Busy with Vanessa's wedding dress preparations, don't interfere. And Vanessa, what did you say? Vanessa stared at the floor and didn't answer. This is what happens when you have a worthless child. Linda quoted her sister's words. You called Noah a worthless. Linda, at that time. Vanessa began weakly. Noah is everything to me. Linda interrupted her sister. I have no obligation to help someone who hurt him. Linda, please. Diane begged through tears. We were wrong. We were terrible. But please forgive us. Please. For what? Linda questioned. So you can do the same thing again? So you can hurt me and Noah again? We won't ever do it again, Robert said in an unusually soft voice. Linda, we were wrong. Especially me. Linda stared at her father. There was something in his eyes that she hadn't seen for a long time. The color of regret and shame. Where's Noah? Diane suddenly asked. I want to see him. Why? Linda was cautious. I want to apologize, Diane said with a serious expression. Directly to him. Linda remained silent for a moment, thinking. In her heart, anger and sadness intertwined. But somewhere, she had always wished for reconciliation with her family. Especially for Noah's sake. Mom? Noah's voice came from the doorway. He had quietly approached in his wheelchair. Noah. Diane cried out, taking a step toward her grandson. But noticing Linda's gaze, she stopped in her tracks. Grandma, why are you crying? Noah asked. The room was wrapped in heavy silence. Linda took a deep breath and made a decision. I might forgive you, but there are conditions, she said slowly. The three stared at Linda simultaneously. A glimmer of hope appeared in their eyes. Name it, Vanessa quickly said. We'll do anything. Really? Linda raised an eyebrow. Then, let's hear it. She stood up and walked to the window. Outside, dusk was falling, and the city lights were beginning to come on one by one. Turning back, her family was sitting, eagerly awaiting her words. The power dynamic had completely reversed. First, Linda said in a quiet but authoritative voice, an apology to Noah, and her eyes were filled with determination. Linda announced her conditions in a quiet voice. You will take care of Noah every weekend until the wedding, 2 months from now. From Friday evening until Sunday evening. Every weekend? Vanessa raised her voice in surprise. You're joking. I'm busy. I have wedding preparations, and I need time with Bradley. Those are my terms, Linda replied calmly. Accept them, or go ahead without a venue. Isn't every weekend a bit harsh? Robert carefully suggested. Couldn't we be a bit more flexible? Linda cut off her father's words. You didn't show any flexibility when I was down with a high fever. Can't the three of you together handle on weekends what I manage alone every day? Robert was at a loss for words and fell silent. That's not all, Linda continued. You will donate 10% of the wedding budget to A Bright Future, a local charity for children with disabilities. 10%? Diane gasped. That's a considerable amount. Mom, Linda looked directly at her mother. Considering your comfortable retirement and Vanessa's engagement to a luxury boutique owner, such a donation should be possible. The room fell into a heavy silence. Vanessa stared at the floor, and Robert and Diane exchanged glances. Finally, Vanessa said in a small voice, what else? Lastly, Linda looked toward Noah. Invite Noah to the ceremony and let him participate as the ring bearer. But he's Vanessa began to say, then quickly swallowed her words. He's what? Linda's eyes flashed sharply. Nothing, Vanessa hurriedly said. Of course, I want Noah to be part of it. Really? Linda calmly asked. Even a worthless child? Vanessa's face turned red, and she lowered her head in shame. Those words were wrong. I'll apologize. She turned to Noah, approached him, and crouched down to his eye level. Noah, what your aunt said was truly terrible. You are never worthless. You're a wonderful boy. Will you come to my wedding? Will you carry the rings for me? Noah looked at Vanessa with a confused expression, then looked toward his mother. Linda nodded slightly and smiled at her son. Okay, Aunt Vanessa, Noah slowly answered. But will you like me? Tears welled in Vanessa's eyes, and she nodded. Of course, Noah. I just never gave myself the chance to know you. I'll change that. Diane stepped forward, trying to smooth things over. So, do we have an agreement? Linda, please, will you talk to Willow Creek Manor for us? Linda took a deep breath and exhaled slowly. I forgot one condition. The three tensed up again. A heartfelt apology to Noah and me, and a promise to keep your word. Robert stood up and, for the first time, stood before Linda and Noah with a serious expression. Linda, Noah, I was wrong. For a long time, I've been a failure as a family member. I'm sorry I couldn't accept Noah as my grandson. I'll change. I promise. Diane joined in, tears streaming down her face. Linda, I'm so sorry I didn't help when you were sick. I was selfish. Noah, Grandma has been a terrible person. Can you forgive me? Vanessa was the last to stand. I was the worst. I only thought about myself, especially calling Noah that way. Linda, Noah, I'm truly sorry. Linda studied each family member's face, searching for the truth in their words. There was genuine regret and shame there. All right, she finally said. If you keep your conditions, I'll call Judith. Relief spread across the three faces. Thank you, Linda. Diane rushed to her daughter, trying to embrace her. Linda took a step back. Not yet, Mom. Trust is shown through actions, not just words. Diane nodded in understanding. So, when do we start the first weekend with Noah? Linda asked. How about this week? Robert suggested. We'll pick him up Friday evening. Fine, Linda agreed. So, this Friday at 6 p.m. After the family left, Linda went to Noah's room and sat on the edge of his bed. Are you okay? Are you scared to stay with them? Noah thought for a moment before answering. A little scared, but Grandma and Grandpa's house is big, and I want to meet Aunt Vanessa's fiancé. Linda stroked her son's hair. Call me immediately if anything happens. I'll come get you anytime. I'll be fine, Mom, Noah said confidently. I'm strong. Linda hugged her son, burying her face in his small shoulder. Yes, you are truly strong. At 6 p.m. on Friday, Robert and Diane arrived as promised. They nervously loaded Noah's belongings into the car and awkwardly said goodbye to Linda. We'll bring him back Sunday evening, Robert promised. Call any time if you need anything, Diane added. Linda nodded and gave Noah one last hug. Have fun. I love you. I love you, Mom. Noah waved from his wheelchair. Watching the car drive away, Linda felt mixed emotions. The anger hadn't completely disappeared, but seeds of hope had begun to sprout. That weekend, Linda spent time with Sarah, enjoying a rare moment of freedom. When her parents brought Noah back on Sunday evening, she noticed a change in her son's expression. Noah's eyes were shining, and he excitedly began to talk about the weekend's events. Grandpa was interested in my programming. We made a game together on his computer. Linda couldn't hide her surprise. Her father had never shown interest in computers before, and Grandma made special pancakes for me, with lots of blueberries, my favorite. Really? Linda smiled. And Vanessa came too. Her fiancé Bradley listened to me talk about wheelchair basketball. Linda looked at her parents. There was something in their expressions that she hadn't seen in a long time. Genuine interest and, beyond that, the color of shame. We should go now, Robert said quietly. Can we pick up Noah next weekend too? Seeing Noah's happy face, Linda nodded. Yes, that's fine. After the door closed, Linda asked Noah, was it really good? You're not just saying that? It's not a lie, Noah answered with a serious expression. It was weird at first, but Grandma and Grandpa seemed really interested in me. And? Grandpa said, I'm sorry I hurt your mom. Tears welled in Linda's eyes. She had wanted to hear such words from her father for years. And, Noah continued, Grandma said, you are our treasure. Linda hugged her son, feeling emotions overflow. It was a complex mix of anger, sadness, and new hope. Looking forward to next weekend? She asked. Yes, Noah answered brightly. Grandpa promised to take me to a fishing spot that's accessible with a wheelchair. Linda smiled. The change had just begun. It would take time to fully restore trust. But she had seen the first step, and she was beginning to have some expectation of where it might lead. That night, Linda sent a message to Judith. Can you restore the Willow Creek Manor reservation? The conditions are starting to be met. The reply came quickly. Of course, Linda. Reservations for your friends are always special. But have they really changed? Linda thought for a moment before replying, they've begun to change. I think that's what matters most. The gardens of Willow Creek Manor glowed in the May sunshine. The scent of roses and lilacs filled the air, and the sound of fountain water created a pleasant ambiance. Nervous? Linda asked as she adjusted Noah's bow tie. A little, Noah answered honestly, looking at himself in the mirror while seated in his wheelchair. But I think I can do it well. You'll make a wonderful ring bearer. Linda kissed her son's cheek. Just like we practiced. A knock sounded at the door, and Robert peeked in. Over these 2 months, he had changed remarkably. His hairstyle was the same, his posture unchanged, but the warmth in his eyes was new. Ready? He asked Noah. It's about to start. Noah smiled at his grandfather. Yes, Grandpa. Linda. Robert looked at his daughter. You look beautiful. Linda was wearing a pale blue dress, her hair elegantly styled up. She gave her father a small smile. Thank you, Dad. This way of addressing him was something she hadn't used in a long time. She could see tears welling in Robert's eyes. The wedding march began to play, and Robert grasped Noah's wheelchair. Shall we go? Entering the venue, all eyes turned to them. The central aisle was carpeted with flower petals, and smiling guests sat on both sides. Noah wore a serious expression, carefully holding the cushion with 2 rings. Linda sat in a back row, watching as Robert carefully pushed Noah's wheelchair forward. Her chest swelled with pride as she saw her son confidently fulfilling his role. Vanessa, dressed in a pure white gown, stood next to Bradley with a radiant smile. Her eyes met Linda's for a moment, and the sisters exchanged smiles. The former coldness and hostility had disappeared, replaced by a new understanding. During the reception after the ceremony, Diane approached Linda's table. It was a beautiful wedding, Linda told her mother. Thanks to you, Diane replied gratefully. The introduction to Judith, Noah's participation, everything was perfect. Mom, Linda said quietly, all I did was give you an opportunity. You changed yourselves. Diane took her daughter's hand. We're grateful to you. It was a painful lesson, but a necessary one. Music began to play, and Noah appeared on the dance floor with Bradley. Bradley was spinning Noah's wheelchair around, and they were laughing together. Vanessa joined them, and the 3 danced happily. Look, Diane said, moved. That smile. Linda nodded. No one needed family. A real family. A year later, an invitation arrived at Linda's apartment door. Opening it, she found it was a card from Vanessa and Bradley. Please come to welcome our new family member. When Linda showed it to Noah with a surprised expression, he excitedly exclaimed, Am I getting a cousin? That weekend, the whole family gathered at Vanessa's new house. In the center of the living room sat an 8-year-old girl in a wheelchair. Her name was Emma, and she had Down syndrome and a spinal disability. Linda, Noah, Vanessa said proudly, I'd like to introduce Emma. Our adopted daughter. Linda was speechless with surprise. Noah immediately moved his wheelchair next to Emma and began introducing himself. Hi, Emma. I'm Noah. We're wheelchair buddies. Emma smiled shyly and waved at Noah. Why? Linda quietly asked Vanessa. Thanks to you and Noah, Vanessa answered seriously. I was truly awful back then. I only thought about myself, but the time spent with Noah opened my eyes, and she stumbled over her words slightly. Bradley and I realized there was a child who needed our love. Blood ties don't matter. What's important is whether we can become a family. Diane and Robert looked happy, surrounded by their 2 grandchildren. Robert especially had a gleam in his eyes as he talked to Emma about wheelchair basketball. Your partner? Vanessa asked Linda. Linda smiled, thinking of Michael, whom she had recently met. He was a pediatrician at the hospital who immediately bonded with Noah. He had to work today, but he'll join us next time. After dinner, the family gathered in the garden. Noah and Emma enjoyed wheelchair races under the starry sky while the adults watched over them. Vanessa sat next to her sister and quietly said, "Thank you." "For what?" "For changing us. Because of Noah, I've learned what true happiness means." Linda looked at her sister and saw the genuine gratitude in her eyes. She smiled and took Vanessa's hand. Families can hurt each other, but they can also heal each other. Under the starry sky, they nodded quietly. They had learned that crisis can become the greatest gift.